Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar. The topic for today is recruiting and hiring top talent for school leader vacancies. And our guest today is Tricia McManus, whom I'll introduce in just a second. My name is John Norai. I'm your moderator, and I'm part of the NASSP faculty. And I will be taking questions as we go through the webinar. So if you have anything you'd like to ask Tricia, please put it into the question box, and I'll pull it up for her as we get to the Q&A at the end. If you have any technical problems today, there's a toll-free number you can call. It's in red on your screen right now, 1-888-799-9666, extension 2. And you'll need that webinar ID number when you call so that they can help you with any troubleshooting that's necessary. If you're using Twitter today to help us spread the message, please use hashtag NASSP webinar. And of course, we want to point out that NASSP has a presence on Facebook at facebook.com/principals. Our website is www.nassp.org/webinar is where you'll find the recording of this today's proceedings, and you'll be able to get the slides there too. So very often people ask, how can I get these slides? They'll all be there for you within 24 to 48 hours. And last but not least, if you are a person who needs a certificate or wants a certificate of attendance, you can get that again in the next 24 to 48 hours at nassp.org/webinar completed. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's presenter. Tricia McManus was born and raised in Tampa, Florida. She received her bachelor's and master's degrees from the University of South Florida. For 17 years, she served as a teacher, assistant principal, and principal in the Hillsborough County Public Schools, 6 years of which she served as a turnaround principal in 2 high-needs elementary schools, where she significantly advanced student outcomes and raised school grades, resulting in recognition from the Florida Department of Education. For 8 years, she served as an executive director of leadership development for Hillsborough County Public Schools. In this role, she provided training and support for school and district leaders and developed and oversaw the Hillsborough Principals Pipeline, a comprehensive talent management system for recruiting, selecting, hiring, developing, and evaluating school leaders. She's now serving as Assistant Superintendent of Leadership, Professional Development, and School Transformation, where she supports the professional learning of leaders, teachers, and instructional support staff, and oversees the improvement efforts of the district's lowest performing schools. Tricia, welcome to today's webinar. I'm going to hand the control of the slides over to you, and we're eager to hear what you have to offer today.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me to be on the webinar, and thank you all of those who took time out of your busy schedules to discuss such an important topic of getting the right talent into our school leader positions. So I am clicking now. I'm going to keep clicking real quick. I think I did this right. All right, so basically, one of the things we really believe is that getting the right leaders into our school vacancies is definitely a process. It's not a one-time event. It's not something we take lightly. It's something that we spend a great deal of time on. And just for a little context, we do a lot of hiring from within, and so many of the strategies you're going to hear are how we cultivate folks all the way from that teacher role all the way into one day becoming a school principal. And so we have many touch points with our leaders. We do hire external candidates as well when there are competencies that are needed that we may not see the right person in our candidate pool. But again, the majority of our hires do come from within the system. So we really believe that recruitment and hiring is just a part of a bigger talent strategy. And so it is very important as a system that we are clear on what our vision and expectations are, and that we understand what the role is we're hiring for when it comes to principals and assistant principals before we even go out to recruit or before we even plan our selection. And so that's what this graphic is basically. Recruitment and hiring as part of a larger talent strategy. And we started advancing our practices with recruitment and hiring when, with the inception of our principal pipeline. And so these are 4 components that are critical if you're going to actually be able to effectively recruit and hire, and there are 4 parts of a principal pipeline. And so I share this slide anytime that I'm talking with any group because this was a game changer for Hillsborough when we started focusing on these together as one comprehensive system. And so the most important part of recruiting and hiring is how you actually define leadership in your system. What is the role of principal in your system? And without that being clearly defined, it's difficult to be able to recruit for that, and it's difficult to be able to hire the right people if that's not defined. And so defining leadership is the first critical component of a strong pipeline. The second is pre-service training, and that's part of how you select leaders and develop them and spend time with them before you actually then hire them for the role you're hiring them for. And so part of a strong pipeline is actually having selection systems that after you've identified what those leadership behaviors and characteristics and skills are, that you actually can select people into your preparation programs based on those skills and behaviors. And then now, after they're finished with that, you can hire them into the actual role you want them to. And hiring is that third component. And then lastly is that on-the-job support that you give them and evaluate them on those same competencies that you started with in number 1. So I will tell you, when I mentioned that it is a process in Hillsborough, it is not a one-time event to hire someone for the principalship. That is actually very true. And so this is a pipeline in Hillsborough County to actually getting to the principalship. So we have 4 solid touch points with people, 3 before they become a principal, and then that last one, number 5, is when they start into the principal ranks. But basically at number 2, we are already selecting teachers that want to become principals one day. At the front end, we have a Future Leader Academy, and that academy, once again, is built and based on those competencies, those core competencies we identified. So we're able to actually spend time with our leaders from number 2 into number 3. Once they become an assistant principal, we spend 2 years in an induction program with them. And now number 4, when they want to become a principal, we're back with those leaders in a preparation program, another preparation program that we actually are selecting them into again. So we have, once again, have more data at that selection and that touch point. And then number 5, when they become a new principal, we spend 2 years. So we know our candidates very well. We're collecting data about their competency strengths. And so that really makes hiring about what is the right match for that leader to go into. And so here is an example of our core competencies. We have 5 of them in Hillsborough. And so as we think about recruiting, how would we be able to figure out who are those great teachers that demonstrate these competencies already that would be good future assistant principals? Who are those assistant principals that demonstrate these competencies at a level that would be great future principals? And so your competencies are a major part of your recruitment efforts and also then your hiring efforts. And so when we started our pipeline, we had to take these competencies and figure out how someone would best demonstrate these competencies if they were in some type of interview process. And so these 5 competencies are not only how we recruit leaders, it's how we select them, it's how we actually develop them. Every bit of our leadership coursework is about these competencies. And then it's about how we hire them and make sure they're the right fit for a school. And so as I continue through the slides, you're going to hear some specific examples of how we do that. So here's one example of, I told you that we have many touch points with our leaders. Here is from our Future Leader Academy all the way up into an experienced principal, how someone might demonstrate one of our elements. And the element is an achievement focus, and it sets and achieves challenging goals. And this just kind of shows how we mapped out that competency or that element very specifically at each level of the pipeline. What would we expect to see? By doing that, we were able to design activities that would show us what is this person's strength and what is this person's area of growth in the competency area. That's very critical when you figure out, when you make decisions about hiring someone and making sure they match the school vacancy that you have open. Knowing what their strengths are and areas for growth is a critical part of that process. And so here are, when we get into our selection at our Future Leader Academy and PNP, so if you remember, those are our 2 pre-service programs. So these are before you get on the job programs. We actually select leaders into those programs using activities that are completely aligned to the competencies. So if you look at this, for example, in both FLA and PMP, we actually have our candidates observe a lesson, provide feedback, and there's a panel that is actually assessing their instructional expertise. We have it at the FLA level, them facilitate a PLC with a group of teachers that we're observing and taking notes. And in that one, we're looking for how do they build relationships? How do they continue to stay focused on achievement? And so we're, again, through all of the activities we do, we are really assessing candidate strength. And why are we spending this much time? It's because hiring is not just about hiring a person for a leadership role. It really is about hiring a person that can help move a school in the right direction. So they've got to have the competencies that are needed for the school. So if you look at the parent meeting, they facilitate a parent meeting, and we're looking how, again, do they build relationships? How do they come to a win-win with a parent? For PMP, same types of things, but they're analyzing data and designing a school professional development plan. They're meeting with a teacher who is resistant to change, and so we are looking at all of that as we are capturing data about and evidence about each of our future leaders' strengths. So if you remember our the graphic that showed you where our leaders, how our leaders go through the pipeline, once they've graduated from our programs or successfully exited our programs, like Future Leader Academy and Preparing New Principals, now they're in our talent pools and we can actually hire them for roles. And so this just shows a little bit about when we go to hire for a role. We have several layers of activities that happen. So remember, they've already gone through our selection systems, they've gone through our training programs, and now they're sitting in those talent pools and a vacancy comes open. And we need to see who would be the best suited. So we have a lot of data already that we've collected, but then we do another series of interview processes to make sure this candidate is going to be the best match for a school. And so we do community interviews. We do learning walks where we take the candidate into the school that they're applying at to talk to them about what they're seeing. We have them present their school, their vision for the school and their 90-day plan, entry plan into that school and what that would look like. And that shows us, you know, what would they bring to the table based on the data they've learned about the school, based on where that school currently is performing. And so that 90-day plan also gives us a lot of information about, is this person going to take the school in the right direction? So another very important part of this entire process is our succession planning process. Long ago, when a vacancy would come open, we would basically be in a little bit of a reactive state. And so something that we changed with the design of our pipeline is adding succession planning meetings. And for the most part, we know when we're going to have retirements. We can forecast those retirements, but we have regular conversations about, are there going to be any promotions that occur where principals might be pulled out of their buildings? Are there going to, for those promotions, are there going to be retirements? Are there going to be any vacancies that are caused due to performance concerns? And so we now have those conversations several times a year. So we are regularly looking at what school vacancies or what schools will have potential vacancies, what are the needs of that school, and then what are the competencies needed for the leader to fill that vacancy. That is all part of the succession planning process. And then we look at both who are the folks in our talent pools. We have all of that data in what we call a leader selection tool or a leader tracking system that I'm going to share with you in a minute. But we have all of the data. So if we say that this school needs, say McManus Elementary is going to need a principal, and that principal is going to need these characteristics to keep moving, or these competencies to keep moving the school in the right direction, we have that data that we've collected from everything I described on each of our candidates that have been through the different pipeline components. And so we're able to start looking at who would make a good match. And so that helps us recruit those candidates to come be part of the interview process. In the event where we've had leaders that we've needed for turnaround schools or schools that have been chronically underperforming, we many times look to our current principals for that, someone with already experience, or even outside the system, folks that may have that experience. And so once again, there are specific competencies we are looking for leaders that may need to move into turnaround schools. And so this succession planning process is critical to not having to be knee-jerk and having knee-jerk reactions when you have a vacancy that occurs, especially if it's in a high-need school. We feel the need to be prepared with a pool of folks that can move at any time in the event we need to fill a vacancy. And so that has really helped us and has shifted the conversation from, well, who's going to go? We don't have anybody ready for that, versus, all right, these are the people that have said they would be interested in that, and these are the people that have the competencies necessary to be successful. So I mentioned a minute ago about the leader selection tool or leader tracking system. All of our data about each of our candidates goes into a tool that we created called the leader selection tool. And this is just one screenshot. This doesn't show all the competency data, but this is how we keep track of each of our leaders. We have information about their backgrounds, what schools they've been in, what their certifications are in, what PD have they taken, what in all of those assessments we've done, that data is housed in this tool. So we can easily, and then you can see where they've, the chevron at the top shows what programs they've been in. And so if they've actually participated in one of our official programs since we started the pipeline, you would see a stamp that shows they completed that program. In the case of this one, it was someone grandfathered in, so they were in the pipeline prior to the start of Future Leader Academy. But this houses all of this very important data so that we can make really, really quality hiring decisions. And so we really believe in Hillsborough that leadership is that key lever that's going to make the biggest difference in our schools, because we know that great leaders attract and retain strong teachers, which is what we need for our students. And so we spend a lot of time and investment on making sure that we are recruiting the right leaders and that we are developing them and then putting them into those right vacancies so they're going to be successful and help our schools succeed. So thank you very much. I'm going to open up now to questions.
Thank you, Tricia. I think I clicked off your slide a little too soon. If we want to go back at any point, please feel comfortable with us doing that. A couple of questions. First one is, where does an outside candidate enter the pipeline? How does that happen? You said a little bit about outside candidates.
So outside candidates enter the pipeline at different phases. So for example, so all outside candidates come in and go through an interview process, a selection process. It's about a 90 to 100-minute interview where we are assessing them using the same process that we would for an internal candidate. So we interview them, we put them through the role play, the performance tasks, and we collect data on them. If they already are an experienced principal, they can go right into our principal pool if they pass that initial selection. They go right into our talent pool, and now they are available to be hired and can start interviewing for specific school positions. If they have not been a principal, but they have completed an approved principal prep program, they also can, so they've been an assistant principal at least 3 years and have completed a principal preparation program. Those candidates too can pass that initial selection and go into the principal pool. If they do not meet either of those criteria, but they are a teacher from outside the system, or they've been an AP for less than 3 years outside the system, they would come in, they would do the selection, but then they would either be placed in our AP pool and in some cases go through our Future Leader Academy if they are here in the system, or if they've met all the criteria and their assessment early on, that initial selection shows that they are demonstrating the competencies necessary to become an AP and they have a couple years of AP experience, they can go right into the AP pool. So we have ways that external candidates can get right into our pools and be eligible to be matched to vacancies, but everyone goes through that initial selection so that they meet the bar that we've set for leaders in our system.
Thank you. The next question is, I'm not quite sure how to phrase it. I have a few notes, but how long has Hillsborough been using or developing, I guess would be a better word, the principal pipeline?
So we started developing the principal pipeline about 7 years ago. And it really, so we were part of the Wallace Foundation grant, and I give all the credit to the learning that we had being part of the principal pipeline initiative. Wallace set the stage for us to learn so much from experts across the country and from each other in 6 of our large urban districts. And so we started the foundational pieces 7 years ago, and each year we were adding new components. In the first year, we really developed what were going to be those competencies, and we started changing all of our selection systems. That same year, we added Future Leader Academy, and that same year, we were improving our principal preparation program. The second year, we added the 2 induction programs, and so we had to develop out all of that coursework. And at that same time, it was about the 3rd year we started designing our succession planning process. And it was also about the 2nd and 3rd year that we were also shifting the role of principal supervisor, which is a really other important part of all of this because they're a key player in recruitment, selection, and in development of our leaders. So it's been a 7-year journey, and it just, now that it's completely sustained, what we do now is just continue to just perfect and take it to the next level with new learning.
And you mentioned that the tools that are used in the screening are also, I'm not sure if I'm going to get this right, they're related to, or they're are what you use in evaluation for principals. Is that correct?
Yes. Can you repeat the beginning of that? You mean the competencies?
Yes.
That those are used to evaluate?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Exactly. And those same 5 competencies, along with the elements that define those competencies, we created rubrics. And so those rubrics, we have selection rubrics that are used in the selection process, and we have evaluation rubrics that are used to evaluate school leaders. And all of them are tied to those exact 5 competencies and the elements that define those competencies.
So if a principal is lacking in an area or in one of the competencies, is there, what kind of training and support is there to help that principal be successful?
So I will tell you, if a leader, there are several things we do. So if a leader that wants to become an administrator, or a teacher that wants to become, or an AP that wants to become a principal, do not get into our selection systems. They don't pass. We actually provide them with individualized support and coaching. We bring them in for a face-to-face feedback meeting after those selection events. If they choose to do this, it's not mandatory. They have to choose to do it.
Right.
We'll sit down with them. We'll give them the feedback from the panels, and then we will put them on a plan for how they could actually improve in those areas and then try to come back through the process. For those that are veterans, we have many modes to developing folks. I mean, we believe the best professional development happens on the job, in the field, in schools. And so we have AP mentors and principal coaches that work with new APs and new principals. And we also, our principal supervisors, our area superintendents, really serve as a principal coach to many of their veteran principals. And so after someone is evaluated using our instruments, you have very clear evidence on what areas they need to improve. And so every one of our leaders writes a goal. They create goals, and they write a goal-setting plan. It's a professional learning plan where they capture 2 areas they want to grow as a leader based on their competency, strengths, and areas for improvement. And then the PD is very customized to what they need. They could go to a course if they want, but a lot of it is something that they will do inside their school with the support of either an external principal coach, their area superintendent. And so it's a mixture of regular leadership courses we offer, and a mixture of what happens at our principals meetings, and then a mixture of what happens that's job embedded actually happening in schools.
Thank you. How does the district go about keeping diversity at the forefront of recruitment efforts?
And that is really important for Hillsborough, and I will tell you it has been a focus of me and my team with the pipeline for several years. And we started really honing in on the recruitment of diverse leaders when we actually wanted to diversify our leaders in schools, and when we looked at our candidate pools, they were not diverse enough at all, and it just wasn't acceptable to us. And so we started some very targeted recruitment efforts for leaders of color in several ways. We had recruitment events in the evening where we actually created invitations and actually asked principals to reach out to their leaders of color in their school, their teachers of color that were going to be great future leaders, and give these personal invitations to them. We've designed programs at the universities with 2 of our partners that really, where we have actually recruited leaders of color as well, very specifically. I mean, we've called it out and we've been very intentional around those efforts, tapping teachers, emailing teachers specifically saying, we would like you to come. I mean, you are an effective teacher who we've been told has strong leadership skills, and we need you to come, and we want to meet with you. We've gone out and met with leaders. And so it's been very targeted, very personalized, and we have actually increased, when I look at our numbers of leaders in our pools ready to be hired, we have increased the number of Black and Hispanic leaders tremendously within our system in the last 3 years, just because we've been targeted and intentional about our efforts. Instead of just doing general things out to everybody, we've actually gone and made personal invitations and told people, you know, we need you. Our kids need you. So I think it's been the targeted efforts have made a huge difference for us.
Thank you. How does the district assess the competencies and skills in order to make the best hiring decisions? You touched on that, but could you say more about it, please?
Yeah, so at the end of every year, we actually, we look across the entire system as to where were the strengths and where as a whole. And it's very interesting because last school year, we had a big push around standards focused instruction or standards-based planning. And a lot of our leaders and our leaders being more able to effectively assess teacher practice around their implementation of standards-based instruction. And so a lot of our leaders had a huge learning curve. And if you looked across the board last year, that area dropped. And so we knew we needed to focus on that more, both through our pipeline training and our ongoing leadership development courses. And so that was a shift because of that. A few years ago, I remember there was a shift on just leaders' ability to communicate effectively. And so that caused us to make shifts in how we develop our leaders. So every year we do a deep analysis across the board of all of our leaders and what were the areas that we need to continue growing. We also reach back out to our university partners with that same information. We have a university convening every year because they are the folks who graduate folks out of the Ed Leadership program. That's the first step in the pipeline, that you've got to have that Ed Leadership degree. And so we actually give them that information too, so they can look at their coursework and figure out where they can help add things that will elevate the practice of our leaders.
Thank you very much. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we move on?
No, just I know that was a lot of steps and 7 years of work in 20 minutes. And if anybody ever wants to reach out for any kind of more information, you're welcome to reach out to me via email. I will get back to you. We have no problem sharing because we had a lot of folks around us that shared and a lot of experts that helped us get to this point. We still have a lot of growing to do, but always willing to share. So if anybody needs more information, I'd be happy to hop on a call or an email.
Thank you, Tricia. We really appreciate your time today. And with that, I'd like to advance the slides. Oh, there it goes. I was thinking you still had control of the slides. Just like to invite all of our listeners today to the 2019 NASSP National Principals Conference. You can see it from the screen. It's July 18th through 20th in Boston, Massachusetts, and it's the largest gathering of principals in the country. So we'd like to put that out there and say, come and learn from your peers and enjoy time listening and interacting. And Tricia, once again, thank you very much. This concludes today's webinar.
You're very welcome.